Hi, my name is Timo and welcome to my GCAP talk, How to Fund Your Studio in 2021 and Stay Sane. So I'm Timo, I'm CEO and co-founder of Alta, a small game studio out of Sydney, Australia. And I have been in the game industry for a while, 14 years, 8 of them I have been in executive role. And by that, I just mean that I was responsible for pitching projects and getting money into the studio. Over my whole time in the game industry, I participated in 21 different projects. 3 of them never saw the light of day, so they got canceled. I was part of 7 studios, 5 of them closed, 2 still alive. Out of 7, I co-founded 2, and 1 failed. Alta is still the one which I'm working on right now. Thanks God, 0 babies, but made a lot of good friends along with the way. So yeah, hopefully more friends down the line. So quickly about my pitching experience. So over the last 7 years, I did about 400 pitches for 14 different deals. 7 of them got closed. So this is about 1.8% success rate, so very low. And by deal, what I mean is that sometimes we pitch a project, sometimes we pitch specific studio. So each deal is like a separate offer we even pitching to to investor, right? On average, I do about 2.5 deals a year, so that's what I pitch. And if you look at the deals closed, it's about 50% success rate, which most people will have higher than that, if they have been in the industry for a while. So this talk is about kind of how do you deal with stress while fundraising. And to start with, this is my experience only. Everybody can have, anyone can have any experience fundraising, and they can be completely different one. So yeah, but I'll just talk about my experience and what I witnessed in the industry and how I deal with stress while fundraising. So the reason why we're here and why this topic of fundraising is very, very prominent right now is that our industry goes through huge change right now in Australia, and there's 3 main drivers behind it. Number one is obvious, people and experienced developers who have been developing projects for a while, and that's normally people who are starting new studios. People who work between 5 to 10 years in the industry, and they might say, look, I have my own idea. I want to start my own company, my own studio, and I want to go for it. And that's why I want to fundraise. And there's plenty of developers, experienced developers in Australia right now, which creates this great ecosystem. Also, there's plenty of success stories. So there's every year there's going to be 1 to 3 games coming out of Australia, which are going to sell millions of units. And as a result, it creates this success stories, which drives investment into our sector. And lastly, is government support has been crazy over the last 6 months. Every state in Australia announcing different support levels, and obviously Australian government just announced 30% tax offset starting July next year, which basically turbocharge this process. And I expect many developers be out there fundraising and pitching their their projects and their companies. So I assume from the beginning that people don't know about fundraising. So I'll just quickly go why we fundraise, who we fundraise from, and what is the process, how we do it. So it's clear where stress comes from, when we talk to you about stress specifically later down the line. So why fundraise? So in most cases, starting new studio is the first time people realize they need money to pay people, and they will actually go out and ask their friends and family or very significant others or anybody, hey, can I have a little bit of money so I can spend some time working on my project. And sometimes it does not even involve money, sometimes just involves time, but I just count time as fundraising. So if you have opportunity to spend 1-2 years working on your project even by yourself, it means somebody has to pay your rent, your expenses, etc., to actually have a chance at that. The second step is when you like a little bit more established, you know what your project is going to be about, you have a studio, and then you want to fund a new project. And generally, this will involve like some kind of demo, some kind of prototype where you go out and ask publishers, investors, platform holders, and anybody else to fund specifically, not your kind of studio, but your new projects based on specific data and specific materials that you have prepared. And third, which is happening much more often now, is when founders and studio owners going out and asking for money to grow their business. And by growing the business, I mean, they already have like established revenue, they already have successful titles, or titles which at least break even, and they either want to fundraise for the next game, or they want to fundraise for the expansion to the studio, or they want to bring the game to the new platform. So that's what kind of I call it a growing a business. So you're not actually trying to start up your kind of journey, you're already on the journey, and you just want to either accelerate it or expand it. So you can fundraise from a lot of different spaces, but when we in this talk specifically, we're focusing on 3 big ones. So it's platform holders, and you all know them, like Sony, Microsoft, like Nintendo, Facebook. Then publishers. So there's like hundreds of publishers out there which fund all kind of content, and obviously VCs. This is venture capitalists which invest in studios at different stages to have like a exit event later, either it's through merger and acquisition or from the company going public. So fundraising process can be like quite difficult and like unknown to many people, like what involves, and obviously for each individual fundraising source is going to be slightly different. So like if you go and try to fundraise from the platform holder, it will be different from what you do when you try to fundraise from VC. But overall, like I summarized this journey into this kind of 5 points, which I feel cover like pretty much like what's happening. So the first stage is obviously preparing pitching materials. And if you're extremely early, it can be as little as just you writing email and just explaining, your idea. So it can be literally like 5 sentences, like, look, I want to make this video game, and here's who I am, please give me money, right? Can be too as elaborate as, look, I shipped this game on this platform which already made tons of money, I want to come to your platform, right? Here is link to the store, please download it, check it out, right? And that also like that might involve budgets, it might involve like game design documents. So pitching materials vary quite a bit depending on the stage of the company you're in and the amount of money you're trying to raise. But that's always number 1 step, just prepare the pitch materials that you need. The second one is like make a list of contacts. And again, it can be as little as like when you talk to platform holders, there's like maybe 5 to 7 or 5 to 10, depending on what part of the world you're in, to like venture capitalists, which can be literally like tens of thousands of different people you can approach. So you'll have to make this list. The first stage is getting introductions. And that's when you like, especially with publishers and platform holders, and like in general nowadays, like cold email is not the way to go. You normally will need to find somebody who knows the person you want to speak to, and then we'll ask for introduction, and they'll get introduced, and that's how you basically make your list, but also network to make sure you can later down the line schedule meetings. Scheduling meetings is though relatively quick process, but it is time consuming, and you need to be able to schedule a lot of meetings like straight away. So you can actually have a market for your product or your game. And then the last stage is a pitch. During that meeting, you will pitch your product. Pitch meetings can go between like 10 minutes to 1 hour, and generally at this stage, you'll get quite quickly yes or no. Like some obviously parties will require like a long due diligence process, but like 90% of the time, everything decided within like the initial pitch meeting. So why so much stress like when doing fundraising? Well, first of all, like people get stressed when they work on important stuff, and fundraising is probably one of the most important things you're gonna do in your lifetime. Running the studio, it's on the same level as launching the game. because if you succeed, then your studio and your company going to automatically go to the next level. Second part that a lot of people don't realize, there's like a lot of work goes into fundraising, and they're not prepared. And I will go in more detail about what work involves, and as we know, like a lot of work which causes burnout, which causes like stress. Nobody goes fundraising to fail, right? So there's expectations to succeed from ourselves, from team members, from other stakeholders, and like if you not meeting this expectation, this also results as like one of the stress triggers, for most people. For me personally, meeting new people is a big stress factor, as I'm introvert, and I just like normally, I have like 8-10 people which I talk often. By often I mean like maybe once a month. And that's like even like more extroverted people might have like 10-20 people which they talk regularly. When you're actually fundraising, you might meet like 100 people in a very short period of time, which you actually need to get to know pretty close, and it can get overwhelming extremely quickly. Fundraising is one of the few situations where you're being judged by so many people, and it just like that's the whole point of fundraising, is to be judged. It's like you go through some kind of competition, but normally in life we don't go through this like extreme competitions where people either say yes to you or no, and like we're not as human beings like used to being judged that openly. And lastly, which is like a huge stress factor, will be just fear of unknown. Like fundraising is one of the first processes in our lives which is completely unknown. Like nobody can tell how it's going to go. There is like a roadmap of how other people did it, but the situation changes so often that your specific fundraise will be completely different from fundraise of person who is doing maybe the same studio, but because they're like in the different location in the world, they will have completely different journey than you will. So this fear of unknown is like what we fear the most as human beings, because we actually want to have some certainty in anything we do. So let's think about like importance and it's like importance is very similar, like how like when we're in high school and doing exam like to go to the college, right? Like in Australia it's like ATAR, right? It's like we know like if we succeed in this endeavor, right, it will have impact on like our career, on how other people view us, how we feel about ourselves. So fundraising is such an important activity. It will be stress trigger. And we know, like, especially for business, like if we don't fundraise, like, we can't hire people, we can't grow, like everything slows down tremendously. So like, it's important to realize that there's kind of three parts to it. It's like, it's important to your personal life, like your personal career, personal to your business, like how it functions, and important to people who work with you closely, especially your employees, your co-founders, stakeholders, and other business partners. As a result, there's a huge pressure to kind of succeed in this undertaking. Starting, I kind of people told me that's a lot of work, but I never understood like why it is in the first place. And we know like if you work long hours, like it will lead to burnout, and you're not really going to function, and you're going to get stressed pretty quickly if you have overwhelming amount of work. The first one is like fundraising is additive work. Like most of the studio founders like have some other role at the studio which they do full time. So it can be like marketing, it can be production, it can be programming, like it can be business development, like it can be a lot of different activities which they already have like full 40 hours to do, and then fundraising generally comes on top of it. So like if you don't plan for it accordingly, it's very quickly for your weeks to turn like from like 50-60-hour weeks to like 80 and 100-hour weeks. And then if you continue like that, like you're just not going to be effective, and then you're just going to burn out. Also, there's a lot of new information, especially when you do it for the first time. Like you need to learn about like the terms, like you need to learn about like different methods of fundraising. You need to learn like about finances. You need to learn about legal stuff. You need to learn how like the funders operate. So you need to learn about the market. So it's so much learning going on. So you like constantly hit with this new information, which you initially were not prepared to absorb, and you need to absorb it really quick so you're effective at your work. And again, as a result, your hours explode. Also, fundraising is like the #1 priority at the company. So as a result, like if you get email from the investor, you generally try to reply to it like within 24 hours, but preferably within an hour. So the process moves forward. So as a result, like everything else at the studio gets very disorganized, because you have to, like, if I'm programming right now and I'm working on some feature, and then if I get email from investor about like XYZ, if they want to know more about my product, I'll generally will drop everything and reply to them. So it's very distractive to like my day-to-day like workflow. Also, fundraising is like exponential in nature. And by that, I mean is that like initially you might start talking to 5 to 10 people, but then they're going to ask you questions, they'll ask you for feedback, then they'll ask you to change some features. Then suddenly, they're going to introduce you to like 10 more people. Then and in 3 weeks, you're just talking to like 40 different people, which want 40 different things, and you just don't know their names. It can get out of the control really quickly, just due to the nature that you need to talk to as many people as possible. So you find out who actually wants your product in the first place. And try to avoid that, but as your studio mature, the fundraising process becomes never ending, right? And sometimes you'll hire people for that, like business development people, which are going to help you with some, but guess what? Like they're not going to help you for everything. So like try to limit though the process is never ending, but try to limit your intensity of the process to specific dates. But you need to realize that, as soon as you're fundraising, you actually never finish it if your studio has some kind of level of success. With fundraising comes expectations, right? And I mentioned a little bit about like expectation from yourself, but generally people who fund studios are already successful in some way or another. They've been a successful engineer, or they already ship successful game. So there is high expectation from yourself to do well, right? And then if you're not doing well, again, that's a huge stress factor. Same with family and friends. Like you told probably everybody, hey, I'm founding a new studio, I'm doing this new project, I'm going to go fundraise, and people expect you to succeed. And sometimes it might not happen. Obviously, co-founders, right? Like generally only one co-founder will be involved in fundraising. So a lot of other co-founders will be waiting on you on the news, and they will be expecting a good news. Your business partners, like you might have already fundraised from somebody, or you have like already some kind of deals, and this business partners think you the most amazing thing ever because they're already working with you, or they can be your vendors, right? Your contractors, which expect you to bring in the money so they can continue doing their work. Obviously, co-workers and employees are like #1 because they actually depend on you for their jobs, right? So like they already believed in you, they already joined your company, so like they expect you to succeed, and that's a huge pressure, just mental pressure to deal with when so many people expect you to succeed. And though we don't realize it, like we're in industry which we think is really big, but at the end of the day, like we know a lot of people in the industry which we met, which can be other co-founders, other studio leads, like platform holders. They're always looking at you and they're judging you all the time in terms of how your company is succeeding, what projects you're shipping, are you signing new projects or not, are you bringing more money? And this kind of industry reputation is really important, and you don't really want to not to meet these expectations, but again, most of the time it's again additional pressure, additional stress. For me, like meeting new people, as I mentioned, is like probably the biggest stress inducer. Is just, and there's two parts to it. First is like it's a lot of people, right? There's like probably I've done like 400 different pitches. I probably met like 2,000 to 3,000 people, right? And normally I don't meet that many people like in any other activities of life. Like totally in my lifetime, counting college and university, maybe I've met like 100 max, right? And which I had close relationship with. And these people are also, want to know you, right? And you will want to know them, because this is like a long-term relationship. If they become your business partner, your investor, or if you sign a deal with a publisher or platform holder, like they're going to have a huge impact on your career, on your company. So you will need to know them, and they will want to know some of your private details. They want to know your history, and it's really hard to open up to people, but that's what's expected, and they're going to do the same for you. Like they're going to share their successes, their failures, and it will get overwhelming really quick. Even if you're like the most extroverted person and you can handle like talking to a lot of people at the same time, like amount of asks you will get from people like about feedback about your company will get so much that you won't be able to reply to emails, and you'll feel guilty about that. You'll feel guilty about forgetting people's names, feel guilty about like, what did they tell me in the last meeting? So yeah, like meeting new people is like can be really, especially like if you just starting, like you think you'll meet 5-10 and that's going to be enough. Well, guess what? Like, you know, you meet 5-10, they'll recommend you to for another. Each of them will recommend you 1-2 people to meet, and it just explodes. And you actually will meet like 100 people, even for smallest of fundraisers you will ever do. We as human beings, like when we're being judged, we normally are judged in very specific environments, right? Being it like high school or university or even our employment, like we already have process in place when we join it. It's kind of the rules of the game are clear. Like, you know, if I get like, you know, A in my math, well, I know I'm judged well. Well, when you're fundraising, there is no like A's, there is no grades. It just, you know, it's just yes or no, and people are going to judge everything. They're going to judge you, they're going to judge your business, your team, your idea, your story, and every one of them will have like different idea what you're doing. And the worst part, like 99% of them will say no, right? Like you might have an awesome conversation, you might share like your vision, and then it still might be no for whatever reason. And that's like, it's really hard to take, because in most walks of life, we don't deal with 99% failure rate. And fundraising is one of those activities which most people, especially initially, will expect, will get about 99% rejection rate, you know, based on their pitch and the idea due to this judgment, which goes on. Fear of unknown is very predominant. Like normally we know what's going to happen, right? Like we're born, go to high school, go to university, get a job, get married, get kids, and then like you know, die later on, right? Like we already know our journey, but like in fundraising, you actually don't know it, right? You actually deal with the chaos, and there's no one there who you can go to and ask them, or give me all advice possible and tell me if I'm going to succeed in this process or not. Like it's not 100%. So no one knows in the world if your deal is going to get funded. Like no one knows that. And that plays into markets being extremely dynamic. Like, you know, what's funded today doesn't mean it's going to get funded tomorrow, and it might get funded again like day after tomorrow. Like when I went through the 7-year journey, like there was like a VR wave, there's like crypto wave, then there is like, you know, new platforms opening up, there's wave for new content. So there's always this waves there, and sometimes you might kind of be right about what waves need, where to go. But guess what, like things which are obvious, a lot of people are trying to get funds as well. So like if a new console generation starting, well, guess what, you're not the only genius who knows, oh, let's go talk to the platform holder and figure out if we need new content. Well, every studio in the world will do it. So sometimes you might be right about the market, but because everybody else is right about the market, the situation is very competitive. On top of that, you have like limited time. Either your studio running out of money, or you need to launch at a certain time. Like this plays into fear of unknown, because you have this your internal clock clicking to succead, and that's probably can be a huge stress factor. It's like when you basically have running against the clock. On top of that, like anything can happen at any time. You can be in the situation where you already negotiated the deal, you already have contract in place, and then next day, you get a call, and then they say, oh, this deal is not going through. Or even worse, like you already signed, you're already like 6 months in, and then the publisher can cancel the deal for whatever reason. And it's also good or bad, it can be good. And just being in the state where like, you don't have confidence in the future all the time, because anything can happen at any time. It can be really stressful for some people. Then you're always asking yourself like, well, what if I fail, right? So you haven't failed yet. You're still fundraising. You might be doing a good job, but then suddenly, you're like, oh, what happens if I don't succeed? And this is a very, very big one for a lot of people, because we're all scared of failure, especially of personal failure. So what to do? Like, over my 7 years, I developed some strategies which help me. But the biggest one is you need to plan to succeed, right? Like you need to have a clear plan in your head how you're going to do your fundraise, what challenges you're going to face, and how you're going to deal with them like one by one. And if you have a plan, you're much more likely to be mentally stable and resilient to overcome anything which comes your way. So I will talk about like different things that help me and hopefully going to help you out as well. So there's like 6 different strategies, and I'll go quickly over them. So there's ego management. It's like, hey, how do I deal with the stress? Then how to basically dissociate yourself from what you're selling. So just becoming a salesperson. Then controlling the flow of information so you don't trigger the external stressors. Then how to build a fundraising team so you can dilute responsibility and actually have people to talk to help you out. How to have a plan B in case you fail, because as you notice, like 50% of the time I failed, so you need to have it. And then how to avoid desperation and at all costs, because that's probably gonna be the biggest deal killer and the biggest mental like being stressed while fundraising is probably even worse than than anything else that can happen, even if you like just try to avoid being desperate at all times. So for ego part is like generally people who found companies that have strong personality and they're risk takers, right? So like you take everything super personal, and you feel like, well, I always used to feel like that. No, like so many people care about what I'm doing, like and they care about my success or my failure, but at the end of the day, no one cares, right? And like even your closest person, your significant other, yes, they care about you, but they don't care about this process. Like if they're gonna love you, they're gonna love you anyway, right? And the same for your employees, same for everybody, stakeholders, business partners. Like no one cares as much as you do. So you really need to realize that even if it doesn't happen, like the earth will keep rotating, the birds hopefully gonna keep singing, but no one cares but you. So, and that's really important to internalize that. If you actually care less about this process, you're gonna feel a little bit better, but don't feel like everybody cares about it as much as you do, because they don't. Stay humble. Like initially, like when I fundraising initially, I was getting first no's. I might get like angry. I might be like, oh, these people are wrong. This is like they don't understand my game. My game is awesome. Like they're stupid. They never invested into games before. Just you need to avoid getting this. Just stay humble. Always be thankful for opportunity to talk to people, and just be pleasantly surprised when things work out. Right? There's tons of people out there trying to do what you're doing. So the more humble you stay, the more likely people are going to talk to you. The more likely it's going to be less stress for you, because you always even keel. And never forget to that fundraising is just a job, right? So focus on not the feelings of rejection, but focus on doing your job well. If your job is like, hey, I have 100 emails on this contact list, well, try to get through them as quickly as possible, right? Try to do your job really well, and that will, like, it will humble you because it's hard to do this job well, but also it will reduce the stress because you're going to be focused on actually doing your job. And if you're doing it well, you're going to get a positive reinforcement, and you're not going to be focused on your kind of ego, kind of saying, oh, like everybody's bad because, because they're saying no to me. And also, like, if you do your job badly, then you will feel like, people are against you, though it's not them, it's you who are not doing the good job communicating the product or being on time, following up, etc. This is a quick one, but this strategy is very, very, very useful. Like, quite often when we pitch our vision, company, or product, we kind of pitch our vision, our company, our product. We pitch ourselves, where it's really helpful to dissociate yourself from what you're pitching. Like, imagine, like, if you just, if you're just a salesperson and you're selling some product which you don't have any ownership of it, you just hired to sell it, right? Quite quickly you will realize that you're going to be focusing on the process of selling rather than feeling bad about that it doesn't sell. And quite often, like, if it doesn't sell, well, like, we can say, a salesperson doing a bad job, it can be like a product doing a good job. So as a result, you will be in better position to be critical about your vision, your company, and your product, and will be able to evaluate it and then think critically rather than emotionally about the situation you find yourself in. So, like, for me, like, during our last project, I really literally, like, I became like a salesperson for our company. Like, I didn't really care, like, what people say about it or what they think about it. My goal was hey, I have 150 people to go to. I need to sell this company in the best way possible, but I have very limited time, so let's go. So I basically, did a very short process, very short pitch decks, because I was a salesperson, because I had limited time, I had other things to do. And I didn't mind if people would say, oh, we don't have enough information about your company, or because, like, well, I need to go through this huge list of people. I just don't have time, as a salesperson, to respond to every concern about my company. So, and that's kind of a good way to move forward. Controlling information flow, like, especially around people about in your studio and like, kind of in your circle, is quite helpful, because guess what, like, 99% of people around you don't actually need to know anything about fundraising process. The only thing they're interested in, did you get the money or you didn't get the money? On top of that, like, most news in fundraising processes are bad news. It's either you got a rejection, or people asking about the product, or they just have some concerns. Even worse, the good news quite often will become bad news. So a good example is, like, sometime, you get your pitch meeting, you get the email back from the publisher, which is like, awesome, we're interested in your product, would love to publish it, we'll send the contract next week, right? And then you go run to your team, is like, awesome, look, guys, like, this publisher which you really want to work with, like, really wants to to publish us. And then guess what, next week comes in, they send the term, and you might have asked for $1 million, but you get back like $200,000 offer. And suddenly it's like, you need to go back to your team and explain what happened, and it just becomes like, this good news kind of became really bad news, right? And on top of that, like, it creates kind of panic in the studio as well, which becomes really contagious. So suddenly people thinking like, oh, you don't know what you're doing, or because they don't understand the process, and and then the job is not getting done, and then the feedback from the publishers or investors not getting addressed, and then it just kind of becomes this circle of panic which you can't get out of. And to help with that is, like, obviously you have to share some information to make final decision, even with your co-founders, business partners. So it's really important to establish a decision-making process where everybody at the studio clear, like if we're getting some of this kind of deals, how we kind of mentally react to them, right? You might say, well, anything above in this situation, like anything above like below $500,000, if we're pitching for $1 million, we're just not gonna consider it, right? And then as a result, like everybody at the studio who needs to know about the process will know, and then you're just like, oh, we received this offer, it's not good enough, we'll continue fundraising, or we're going to do counter offer. And it creates zero stress, zero panic, because everybody's prepared and everybody knows what decision-making process is. Normally, you really want to kind of get everybody on board at the last stage where you're happy with the terms, you negotiate the terms, and then you just bring it to your co-founders or your business partners, say, hey, that's the terms, let's all agree on it. So, but try to avoid like all in between steps, sharing it, oversharing it, because most of the time it's just going to create panic. Fundraising team is like sometimes, like I would say you all should always have it. And most of the time it's going to be external people who are very proficient at fundraising and, or, went through this experience, like, it can be like other co-founders, other studio leads, which are going to help you with your process. Initially, I was very against that, because normally either you have to pay them in cash or equity, or they want some kind of, return for their time. But in the end of the day, it's going to be always worth your time and your kind of mental state to build a fundraising team. And it has to be external people from your team most of the time. So I'm going to just talk quickly about like team composition and like what do they do. Like most important person is by far strategic advisor, and this person is going to basically set the plan or help you to set the plan for fundraise, and like what do you need to do, who do you need to approach, and what the strategy is going to be. The second person is a hustler. Hustler is to just basically move stuff along, and most of the time it's going to be you, right? You're going to be basically answering all the emails, you're going to move process forward and make sure everything is done quick, and then come up with weird ideas or like weird hacks to make the process go quicker. You will definitely need somebody who will be a doer during this process, and this person is normally either communicates to the team the feedback and make sure the feedback is addressed, or they're working on the pitch decks, or they're working on the budgets, because it's really hard when you're hustling also at the same time invest time into doing like budgets and like adjusting the pitch decks, because you're just never going to have enough time and you'll get like stressed the hell out, especially if you're not good at making pitch decks. Financier and lawyer at early stages can be combined together with strategic advisor, but you just need these two people who know like financial terms, legal terms, can advise on different structure of the deal. So for example, like, if you have a milestone payment with your deal, like, you know what happens if milestone, like, if you don't deliver and then milestone doesn't get paid, like what's the next steps, how it's addressed, resolved, etc. And obviously have a friend which is kind of in your corner, which you can talk to at any time, right? And by friend, I mean somebody in the industry who you can be pretty open about how you feel, like it's about your feelings, like how it goes. And then like quite often they'll calm you down or they will talk through the situation, but you need somebody who's external to the team. So like when you like say, oh, I just had like 5 meetings this week and then all of them struck out. Like it's not really information you want to share with your team, and it's information which you want to share with your external friend, which will be able to understand it and then will be able to help out and like be emotional support when you need it most during this process. Always have plan B, C, and D in place. I just assume the fundraise will fail. Like, as I showed you in the beginning, 50% of the time the deal wasn't closed. So you need to have, plan for the studio to continue, or if studio doesn't continue, for studio to shut down. And in my and world does not end if you fail fundraise. Like there's always options out there. And for me, like, some of the things I've done is like quite often, like, I talk to my co-founders and say, look, if we don't fundraise, then we can't get paid. So we extend timeline for our studio. Or I'll go to my like friends and family and borrow money so we can work more on the project, so we can do another fundraise later. Or like, I'm going to start like, today I'm pitching to publishers, and I know, if I don't succeed, then I'm going to pitch to platform holders, and then I'm going to pitch to investors. So always have this optionality kind of ingrained in your plan, because if you have it, then like you reduce uncertainty by significant amount. And be transparent about these plans with your team, right? Like not like, we're going to shut down the studio if it doesn't succeed, but just be transparent, because like if you just fail in fundraising and then they don't know what the next step is, then it just creates more problems, more stress, because you kind of introduce uncertainty to the studio. Like one of the ways I was like managing like shutting the studio down is by talking to other studios in the area, introducing my developers to them, just to make sure that they will have easy way down the line to find jobs if if we get to the situation where we can't fund our development anymore. Always at all, like and I talked about previously, always avoid desperation. Like desperation is just comes when you either unprepared or you're just overwhelmed by stress. And here's some things which you really need to consider. Prepare well for your stage, but don't over prepare. So if you just like quit your job, starting in the studio, well, guess what? Like probably it's a bad idea to go and like spend like 6 months developing a prototype. Maybe spend like 2 months asking people for money and see how much you can raise. Like even if you raise $10,000, it's better than zero, right? And then you can spend this 10,000 on building your prototype, right? At the same time, like if you already established a studio and then you're pitching publishers for like millions of dollars, maybe it's a good idea to to develop your demo so that it looks good and everybody feels good about it at the studio. So even if it doesn't succeed, it's not gonna, it's not because of you, but because of the like market forces. Time you fundraise like when appropriate, right? If, for example, right now nobody funds VR studios, don't try to go and get money for VR company, because then it's like people will think you're desperate, right? So like time you fundraise when the things which you think getting funded are getting funded, right? So like always try to time you fundraise with actually some kind of events which are going to help you out versus doing it like randomly for no good reason. Or for example, like you just launched the game and the game did well, it's a good time to fundraise, right? Even if you might not have all the materials ready. And then set deadline for your fundraise. Don't let it go for forever, because the longer it goes, the more desperate you get. So just say, hey, I have 2 months to close this deal, or I have 6 months, or I have like 2 weeks. Just set a deadline and stick to it, and then actually it will help you to close faster, and then it will reduce uncertainty as well. Always be in position to say no. Like even if you get a good terms, like well, even if you get like terms which are bad, just say no, right? And if you put yourself in the position where you need money so desperately, where you're going to say yes to everything, then you're going to get into this desperation cycle of always saying yes to bad deals, or the first deals you see, just to keep going. And that's kind of desperate behavior where you don't want to be in. And more importantly, investors feel desperation, right? They know that something's not going well, and they generally just don't want to work with people who they perceive as desperate. And importantly, team members feel it as well. So you'll have problems, retaining people and just being like open with people, because they feel that something is wrong. So never get a situation where people can feel that you're desperate. So other tips is optimize for long-term value, right? Like if you're in the game industry, guess what? People which you meet during fundraising process, like it's not, and they even said no to you. Guess what? Like in 5 years time and 2 years time, they're the same people who are going to say yes. And that's normally the story for everyone who went through this process. Like your relationship you build at these early stages will actually determine your success down the line. And always have fun. Like it's your journey, it's your life. Yes, it's hard, but just have fun. Make jokes. Try to find something good, humorous, positive, humane in this interaction, right? So like value people. Don't judge them by them saying no. Just judge them by the people who are. And then take care of people who care about you. In this process, like a lot of people will help you out just absolutely for free. They will work overtime. They'll go like, dozens of people helped us to get to the point where we're in, and they just did it because they're nice people, right? So just take care of them, always be thankful, and never forget about them as well. So again, thank you for being at this talk. I would like to thank GCAP team, first of all, because I took so much time to get this talk done, and they were really patient with me. and I really appreciate that. Would like to thank everybody on my team. Without them, nothing would be possible, period. Would like to thank our investors who fund us and allow our dreams to happen, and our partners as well. And specifically would love to thank Serena and Victor for helping with this talk and getting it done. At Alta, we're also hiring. So if you're a game developer, artist, designer, just visit our careers or email to me, and I'm happy to chat about it and see, if you're going to be a good fit to work together down the line. And I'm always happy to help founders, studio heads, or anybody who's thinking to start their own studio. I'm always reachable. You can reach me on the social media channels. And I'm again, as I said, tons of people help me, and I'm always happy to help at any time. So yeah, feel free to reach. And if you have any questions about fundraising, if you're going through the stress period, just ping me, and I'm happy to chat at any time. Thank you very much, and have a great GCAP.